So if any of you out there have a picture on your resume, take it off. If any of you have a full address on your resume, take it off. If any of you out there have a birth date or your social security number, take it off. Any kind of age indicator is not something that employers need to see. Hi, I'm Carrie, and this is the Back to Work podcast. If you've been home with your kids and you're starting to think about going back to work but have no idea where to start, you are in the right place. Because this isn't just about getting a job. It's about figuring out what's next and how to actually move forward. I've spent 20 years in HR, and I was a stay-at-home mom for 8 years before going back myself. Each week, I'll help you go from I don't know where to start to I start tomorrow. And if you want a little extra support, check out the Start Here guide in the show notes. It's a simple plan to help you get back to work. Welcome to Back to Work, the podcast for stay-at-home moms who want to go back to work but aren't quite sure where to start. So today, we are going to do something a little bit different. I am going to go over some resumes and give an audit of what I see. These are resumes that I found on Reddit, so they're all different. They all have their strengths, they all have their weaknesses. And I'm going to go through and let you guys know what I see when I look at these resumes as somebody who has looked at resumes for 20 plus years in my HR career. And hopefully it will give you a starting point on how to build your resume. So we're just going to dive in. I've picked some random resumes, but before we even get into those, I am right now on Reddit and I see resumes. And so I'm not even clicking on them. I'm just looking at the little screenshot that they have provided. So I can't see the text. I can only see the format. So the first thing that I want you to think about when you're building your resume is readability. What does it look like to the person who is reading it? And when I say that, I mean font, spacing, whether or not it's 1 page or 2 pages or more. Where are you bolding? How are you separating the sections? So I'm looking at a resume right now. Again, I can't see what it's for. I can't read it. I can just see the format. And the first thing I see is everything is very close together. So that tells me that it's difficult to read. And if it's difficult to read, it's going to get skipped over. And that is because if it's going to take the recruiter effort to look at your resume, chances are they probably won't. They want to be able to skim it and see things that jump out at them right away. And if everything is kind of mushed together, you can't do that. Now, I understand why this person did that. It's because their resume is long. So their resume is, let me just open it up here. Their resume is 2 pages long. And there's nothing wrong with having a resume that's more than 1 page. More than 2 pages, that's too much. But sometimes, depending on what the job is for, and how much experience you have, 2 pages can be okay. I like to stick to the 1 page, but sometimes you just can't, and 2 pages is fine. So this person tried to put all of their experience, all of their education, all of their skills, they tried to really fit it in so it would only be 2 pages, because I imagine if they spaced it out the way that it would make it easier to read, it probably would have been 3 pages and that would be too long. So my recommendation to this, if you find yourself in this position, is to really look at what you have and cut out the things that aren't completely necessary. Start with jobs that are very old. You don't need them on there, especially if they're not relevant to what you're applying for now. You might want to cut out some education. You do not need your high school education on there. You don't even need your college if you have a master's or something like that. Just list the latest education. So that's another way to kind of pare it down. The other place to pare it down is just in skills. Are you being redundant? Are all the skills that you're listing necessary to the job that you are applying for, right? So you really just want to give it a pass or a look and see where you can scale some of that down. So that's my first recommendation is don't make it cluttered looking. Okay. When you're done with your resume, reduce the percentage and make it, I don't know, 35%, 40%, something like that. So you're just looking at the pages and you can't see the words. So you can see what it looks like and whether or not it is too busy. So that's the first thing I would recommend. So I want to dive into some of the resumes that I chose, and they are all different. I have a tech one, I have one that's for accounting, and I have one that is for entry level. So let's just look at the tech one first. And, some of you hearing this might say, well, I'm not going into tech, so that doesn't matter. It's not about the type of work. This is about the structure of the resume. And I want to kind of point out the different things that I see that are good and the things that I see that could be better. So the first thing I see when I look at this resume is the skills that they list are on the bottom. Not the total bottom, but close to the bottom. And so skills should always be at the top, because that is where recruiters are going to see whether or not you have the skills that they're looking for. And back to the formatting piece, when you list out the skills, don't list them, make it a list format, make it columns, right, for the section that you're doing. Like tab it over so you can have 3 columns or 2 columns if that's enough. Don't make a long list. Spread it out over the page and put it at the top. Your skills should be at the top. The next thing I see, there are no bullets. So it's not really easy to see when one line ends and one line begins, especially because a lot of what I'm looking at, the sentences are 2 lines long, and that's fine too, but you want the recruiter to be able to look at it and very easily skim through it. And without the bullets, that's difficult to do. So throwing some bullets in there. The other thing I see is education. And education should typically be on the bottom, and education on this resume is somewhat in the middle, which isn't terrible, but it's just better to have that on the bottom because honestly, that is the least kind of important piece of information. If a job that you're looking for requires that you have a college degree or something like that, then maybe it's a little more important, but still, it is usually at the bottom. But the main thing I see with this resume is that this person listed that they went to community college and they also went to state university. You don't need to put that you went to community college because this person has a bachelor's of science in computer science. And quite frankly, it doesn't matter how they got that. They have it. So you don't need to list that you also went to community college to showcase that you went to college, okay? So get rid of that. Don't have extraneous education institutions in your education section. If you have certain certificates that are relevant to the job that you're applying for, then definitely list those separately because that shows that you're keeping up to date with your industry. And so that's fine. But again, you don't need to put that you went to community college if you went to state university. The other thing I see is that this person listed projects, and that's totally fine. But the way that they listed them is a little bit ambiguous because they have 2 projects listed and all they do is talk about what the project is. And they don't talk about what their role in the project was. So if you have projects that you want, specific projects that you worked on, in addition to your professional experience, that's totally fine. But make sure that you have what you did on that project and make sure that it's relevant to the job that you are applying for. So that's the first resume that I see. The actual content of the resume in terms of the way that they worded things is very good. They have action verbs. They give enough detail, but not too much detail. The only thing I would say, and I don't know what jobs they're applying for, is that you want to pull in some language from the job description that you are applying for, and you want to put that into your resume. Not word for word, but you want to sprinkle in some of the same language that they have in the job description, because when recruiters see that, they're like, oh, that's exactly what I'm looking for, right? And even if what you put on your resume is the same thing as what is in the job description, changing the wording to match what is in the job description makes a big difference. All right, so I'm going to go to the next one, and this one is the accounting one. So, all right, so let me just take a look at this. So the first thing I see, education is on the top. Now, I understand why this person did that, because they're saying that their expected graduation date is May of this year. So they're not quite graduated yet. So in that instance, maybe that needs to go at the top. That might be okay in this instance. But I think that's preference. But that is sort of alerting people that, hey, I'm not graduated yet, but here's my experience, right? Now, the other way that people would be able to see that is that in the job experience, it says tax intern. So that sort of implies that this person has been a college student or is a college student, but it's fine. The other thing I see in this resume is this person did put bullets, and it is much easier to read because when you put the bullet, it automatically makes that spacing between the lines, and it's important. It is much easier to read and skim. So I do like that. That was a smart move on their part. Again, this person has skills at the bottom. I would say that needs to be at the top. I would flip the education and put it at the bottom and the skills at the top. If this person wants to highlight that they're still in college, then you can add a summary at the top to explain a little bit. I wouldn't go into a ton of detail, but to just say, that they are currently a college student scheduled to graduate in May, and they are looking to work in, whatever industry that they're working in, and then list the skills and then list their experience. So overall, this resume is pretty strong. I like the way that they have worded their experience. It gets a little bit wordy. I get the sense that they use ChatGPT, which is totally fine. But when you do that, you just want to make sure, because ChatGPT can get a little bit wordy, you just want to make sure that it doesn't get too wordy. But overall, I think that this resume works well. And the other thing, if you have a skill that other people might not have, like this person has languages that they speak, and they speak Spanish and Japanese. That's a skill that some employers want. So again, he does have, or I shouldn't say he, I don't know if it's a he or a she, but this person does have languages listed under skills, which is great. And again, I would just put all that at the top. So summary, skills, experience, education is the way that I would do that. The last thing I see on this resume is that the person put the city that they live in. And that's okay, but it's unnecessary. You don't need to do that. Whether or not you live close to the company that you are applying for is kind of irrelevant, because the only thing that employers are allowed to ask you is if you are able to get to work, basically. And it doesn't matter how you get there. You could get there by train and by bus on the same day. As long as you're there every day at the same time, they don't care, or they shouldn't care. Where you live is not super relevant. I would just leave it off. Okay, so the last one that I'm looking at is for an entry-level position. And the first thing I see on this resume is that this person has their picture on it as well as their full address. And I can't see what the address is. They have that blacked out, but it says address, phone, email, and the address line. There's a very long line indicating that it's the full address, street address, city, state. So that is unnecessary. You don't need that. Take that off if you have that on your resume. You don't need to add your address. And your picture, take it off. You don't need your picture on a resume. I know that some of the templates on Word and other templates that I see have a space for you to put your picture on your resume because it's sort of going off of the LinkedIn format. But it's unnecessary and actually can hurt you, because employers are not supposed to discriminate. but I can tell you that they do. And I'm not even talking about discriminating against minorities and the groups that you would assume that people discriminate against. I'm talking about personal preferences. So if somebody looking at your resume doesn't like your face for whatever reason, and it doesn't have to be anything to do with anything, it's just they just see you and they make a judgment, you're not going to get a call. So just don't give them the opportunity to be able to do that. So just take your picture off. If you really want them to see who you are, then you can add your LinkedIn profile, but I wouldn't even recommend that. I wouldn't even recommend that until after you have had a conversation. I have looked people up on LinkedIn after I've spoken with them just to get a general sense of whether or not their resume matches what's in LinkedIn. And I know it's not ever going to be exactly the same, but just as a general check, I'll do that. And obviously I'll see their picture at that point. But at that point, I've already had a conversation with them. And so it's a bit different than having the picture on your resume be part of the first impression without talking to you first, okay? So if any of you out there have a picture on your resume, take it off. If any of you have a full address on your resume, take it off. If any of you out there have a birth date or your social security number, take it off. Any kind of age indicator is not something that employers need to see. Okay, so let's continue on with this resume. So this person has a summary, and that's fine. Again, the skills are at the bottom. Put the skills at the top. So if you want to have a little summary, that's fine. Put your skills under that. I would say that this summary is a little bit too long. I think it needs to be just maybe one sentence. I think the summary is just a little bit too long. I think it should be maybe one sentence, maybe two, but keeping it really tight to what it is that you're looking for. And this person has kind of melded skills with what they're looking for. And really, it could just be what they're looking for and then have skills be separate. Okay. Again, you're thinking about recruiters getting lots and lots of resumes for the same job, especially for an entry-level job. You're going to get more resumes for an entry-level job than you would for a higher position. And so there's lots and lots of resumes to go through, and any little thing that gives the recruiter some kind of friction in terms of looking at your resume, they're just going to go past it and they're going to go to another one. The job of your resume is to get you that first phone call. And that is when you have an opportunity to shine. The resume just gets you to the phone call, and then your conversations do the rest. So summary and then the skills. Now, so the next thing this person has is work experience, and it's not terrible. I think it needs to be a little bit more detail. So if you're finding yourself with very, very basic sentences about what you do, my advice is to throw that into ChatGPT, see what it comes up with, but don't just copy and paste it again. You got to think about, they're going to be really wordy, but it might give you an idea of how to extend or elaborate is probably a better word on what it is that you did in that job. Okay. And when I say elaborate, I don't mean enhance or embellish. I mean wording things in a way that you might not have thought of that really captures what you did. That's what we're going for. That's what you want to do. One thing I do notice on this person's work experience is that one of their jobs, they just have one date, November 2025. And so as a recruiter, I don't know what that means. Does that mean that you worked there for 1 month and then you left? Or does it mean that you still work there? So you want to make sure that you have a second date on there. And so if it's a current job, you want to put the date that you started and then say to present or dash current, something like that. So the recruiter understands that this is a job that you're still in. Otherwise, it looks like you were at this job for 1 month or less, and that was it. So that's not a great look. Okay, so this person has a high school diploma. The only thing I would say about that is having a date of when you went to school, when it's high school, will tell somebody what your age is. And so sometimes that matters less than others. I always recommend to not have it on there. This person seems to be young given the dates that they have on here. And so this is probably their first attempt at getting, a full-time job. And that's okay. But instead of having the dates on here, I would recommend in the summary saying that you're a recent high school graduate. And that way it tells people that you just graduated. It just gives them more information without completely giving away what your age is. Okay. And so this person has skills. Again, it's skills at the bottom. So put the skills at the top. And this person has their skills listed out in a list format. And again, I recommend that you spread that out across the page and you only have like 1, maybe 2 words to list your skills. Okay. So for example, this person put that they have basic proficiency in digital tools like Google Workspace, Canva, and IBS Paint. And all that's great. But you don't need to put the basic proficiency in digital tools like Google, like whatever they are. Just list out the skill. If you want to put software and then like a semicolon or something and then list out the software that you have skills in, that's fine. But just list them out. Google Workspace, Canva, IBS Paint, like whatever else you have, just list them. But again, have it go across the page and don't do it in list format. All right, the last thing I see on this resume is that this person listed their references on the resume. You don't need to do that. So I would recommend just taking that off. If somebody wants references, they'll ask you. Not all companies are going to ask you for that. So there's no reason to have people's phone and email on your resume going out to all these people. It's just not necessary. It takes up space. You could use that space for something else, maybe more skills, maybe a couple more bullets about your work experience. All right, so those are the 3 resumes that I have for you. And what I want you to remember when you're searching for a job is, number 1, I recommend just using the Indeed format for your resume. You don't have to build it on Indeed, although that is probably the easiest thing to do. But it's cleaner, it's familiar to recruiters when they see it, and so they don't have to think about it much. You don't need to get fancy with your resume. It's just information. What you want is for it to be clear and informational. If you start trying to get fancy with it with elaborate templates that you can find on Word and other places, Canva, I'm sure Canva has resume templates. When you do that, it distracts from the content of your resume. And you don't want to do that. You want the content of your resume to shine, and you want the format of your resume to be easy enough to read that people can focus on that content. Don't get discouraged when you're making your resume. You might have to go through it a couple of times, and that's fine. You just want to make it simple, easy to read, and to show people that you have the skills that they're looking for. All right, that's what I have for you today. If any of this resonated with you, please go to the show notes and find the link to the Start Here guide, which will help you make your first 4 decisions about going back to work. And if you want your resume audited by me, send it to contact@carriemcfarland.com. I'll leave that in the show notes for you. I hope everybody has a great week. I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for being here. If this episode helped you, make sure to follow the show, share it with someone who needs it, and leave a quick review. I appreciate you more than you know.